Okay, everybody, we are going to be talking about the progressive movement or the progressive era. And then on the screen, you can see what are some of the key questions to kind of consider as we go through this and what was wrong with America, what attempts were made to fix it, and who worked to fix these problems. And so we're talking about 1900 to about 1920. So, when is this going on? So we're just after the period of industrialization. So as you guys know, there's all kinds of issues that have resulted from industrialization, overcrowded cities, all of that stuff. And so this is the time period where we call attention to those issues and try to fix them. And so the first part is, who were the progressives? So this is what we call the progressive umbrella. And these are the people that are largely, so as you can tell, there's a lot of folks, and I'm sorry for that weird typo there. But anyway, these are the people that consider themselves progressives, and they all have different agendas and different issues that they would like to address. So the first group, those are the muckrakers. And so muckrakers are people who rake the muck of the nastiness, the dirt of society to the surface. And that term was given to them by President Theodore Roosevelt, or Teddy Roosevelt. And they are people who, they're essentially journalists and photographers who write about and try to expose all the problems in society and kind of bring attention to it so it can be addressed. And we have journalists like that today in 2019. Second group are the suffragettes. Those are women and men who are working for women's suffrage, which is the right to vote. And so women, as you guys know, in 1900 do not have the right to vote. And so they are trying to promote the idea that this is something that we need and something that is good for America. The third group are populists. Populists are people who, a populist is someone who represents essentially the little guy. So they're the opposite of our wealthy industrialists that we looked at before. We're not talking about Carnegie or Vanderbilt or Rockefeller. The populists represent blue-collar workers, so people that are working in the factory, as well as farmers. And they try to bring their issues and needs to the forefront so that people can see that they're struggling and that they have a specific set of needs that need to be addressed, like better wages, safer working conditions, all that stuff. The temperance movement is our next group underneath the progressive umbrella, and temperance is the prohibition or forbidding of alcohol. They are the people who are very religious and think that a lot of the problems that exist within American society are a result of alcohol and its abuse. And so they are the people who are trying to get rid of alcohol. The Goo-Goos is a weird one. The Goo-Goos are the good guys. They are politicians who are reform-minded, and they are the ones who want to use their position as a politician, right, as a mayor, as a governor, as a president, as a congressman, to bring about positive change. So that basically they want to pass laws and change society, because that was going to be really the only way that we got things done, was by the passage of laws. And so the Goo-Goos, or the good guys, are important politicians that are going to bring about change. This next group says women MC, and I apologize if that's confusing, but that's middle-class women. Women who have risen up from the lower class to a new middle class, and who feel a sense of responsibility to help those that are in a lower position than them, because basically I've been there. I feel you. I understand your struggle, and I want to help you move forward. And so a lot of the leaders in the progressive movement are middle-class women. So in that sense, this is a time period where women are going to be kind of empowered and feel much stronger and more vocal about what they think is wrong with society. Next group is labor unions. We're familiar with them. As you guys know, by 1900, the Knights of Labor is kind of defunct and kind of gone, but we do have the American Federation of Labor and lots of other small labor unions trying to bring about positive change for workers, such as, working conditions and pay and all that stuff. Lastly, the last group that we have to talk about under the progressive umbrella are folks that are working towards civil rights and trying to bring about changes for African Americans in this country who, obviously in the southern part of this nation are still being greatly discriminated against via the system of sharecropping and Jim Crow laws and all of that exist that are holding African Americans down. And so those folks will try to bring about change. And so that's the progressive umbrella and the people who are going to try to bring about change. And so their big goals are working using the government, making the government accountable to people and making sure that the government doesn't just look out for themselves. We want to work toward getting rid of monopolies and abusive large corporations that are not protecting the rights of their workers and not serving the public interest. We want to work towards things like social justice, protection of minorities, protection of workers, protection of the poor, all of that. And then lastly, one of the goals of the progressive movement is environmental protection. And so that's new. We haven't talked about that yet. But because of industrialization, we are basically just destroying our environment and just using natural resources like with no concern for the long-term consequences of that. And so during this era, we'll start to see some push for environmental protection. And that's going to come largely from President Theodore Roosevelt, amongst a couple others, but big time Teddy Roosevelt there. They're going to have to achieve these changes through the use of government. They're going to have to create laws, new regulations, new programs put in place that can change the way society operates. And then they're also going to affect this change through the continued use of working smart, being efficient, using things like scientific study to determine the best solution. We looked at that scientific management video where I showed you the bricklaying and trying to make sure that we are working as smart as we possibly can and not wasting. So these are some of the muckrakers. Reform-minded journalists, and we'll talk about them. Upton Sinclair, Thomas Nast was the first political cartoonist in this country. Upton Sinclair writes about meat packing in factories in Chicago. This woman, Ida Tarbell, writes about the Standard Oil Company and Rockefeller's abuses of his employees. And so those are some of the key muckrakers that you should know. Nast, Reese, Lewis Hine takes photos of young kids and some of their struggles living in the city. Reese also writes, remember that book, How the Other Half Lives, and his pictures and writings are significant in drawing attention to that. And so those are some of the biggies. Some of the local reform that we try to bring about, it's called municipal reform. That means local. It's on the city level. We're going to try and make cities better. We're going to try and make them nicer by having water, gas, electricity, trolleys. We're going to set up structures of government that are more fair, basically. This picture is kind of cool. These are Bowery men, which basically are workers, poor workers. And they had gifts from the ward boss because we used to have political machines that were pretty corrupt. And basically they would give gifts and favors and stuff to people to try to earn their vote, not because they actually deserve the vote, but because they gave them stuff. And in this picture, you can see they've all got shoe boxes in their hand. So, which is like, wow, like new pair of shoes. Like I really need that. I'm a worker. I can't afford a new pair of shoes. And so the ward boss gives me a new pair of shoes. And so guess what? I'm going to vote for that guy. And so we're trying to get away from this type of manipulation and corruption. And these are some of we won't go over this, but these are some of and you can pause the video and look at it if you're curious. But these are some of the different plans that are put in place to try to get rid of the political boss kind of a model. On the state level, this guy is important. Fighting Bob Lafayette is how you say that, or Robert Lafayette. He's the governor of Wisconsin, and he is basically the OG when it comes to trying to change the way government works. And the way that he goes through and changes the way state governments work, and then hopefully the federal government eventually, is by implementing some of these things. Number one is the secret ballot. So the secret ballot was you could go up to, it's like how it is now. You can go up to the ballot box and no one can see how you vote. vote. And when you put your vote in the box at the end of it after you voted, it's secret. No one knows. Well, it used to be that you would walk up to the ballot box and there were two boxes. You would cast your vote, and then there was a Democratic box and there was a Republican box, and everybody could see what you were putting your vote in. So everybody knew how you voted. And so they could manipulate people and kind of like coerce them into voting the right way. So if they saw you go up and put your vote into the Democratic box, they potentially might confront you after you leave the voting place and beat the crap out of you. So the secret ballot was really important to protect people's freedom to vote the way they felt like they should actually vote. So that's really important. The direct primary is a second thing that Lafayette does, and in Wisconsin. And basically what used to happen is that the city bosses and all the powerful people in the country used to just basically pick who they wanted to represent the state. And they would just say, oh, okay, I pick you and you and you. You're my guy. You've got my back. So you're going to be the next state senator or state representative. And so, as you guys can imagine, that's ridiculously corrupt. Like, that's not fair. And so they implemented something called the direct primary. And what that means is the people directly voted for who was going to be the representative. And so it's a more direct or active role for people. And so that's a big deal. The 17th Amendment is important. It gets passed in 1913, and that's not Lafayette's doing, but it's just kind of important in the sense of it being a part of state reform. The 17th Amendment calls for the direct election of senators. And what used to happen was that the state legislatures, so like everybody that's a part of like the Ohio State Congress, would just like pick. And so instead, now we have everybody in the state of Ohio or Wisconsin or wherever we are actually voting for the candidates that they think are best qualified. And so again, it's a more active participation on the part of citizens of that state. Instead of just a few powerful people doing it, now everybody's a part of it. So this is more of like a direct democracy. And that's kind of a term that is important to consider when you're thinking about the progressive era. More people involved, more people participating. Last three things that are pretty key about state reform is three things that, three kind of voting changes. The first one is initiative. An initiative involves the people being able to start a law. It used to be that only people that were already in government could basically write a law and get a law passed. Well, initiative is like, if anybody knows anything about a petition, like, I want you to sign this petition so that we can have Pizza Fridays every day here at school. And if 25,000 people sign my petition, then I can get it on the ballot and then we'll vote on it. So the initiative is the petition part of it, getting people to sign a piece of paper saying they want this change to take place. So if we want to move toward a no homework policy, you guys could get a petition together. You get everybody in the school to sign it. You get all the parents in the community to sign it. And if enough people sign it, then we're going to put it on the ballot. And the ballot, what happens is the next step. It's called a referendum. A referendum is when you refer, right? See the root there. You refer the issue back to the people. And what that means is you've got 25,000 signatures that say we should have no homework ever in the Mariemont City School District. And so then we take a vote. We have an election. Like, we have an issue on the ballot that says, there's an issue that says that there's a movement that people do not want any more homework. What do you say? Do you say yes? Or do you say no? And you literally check your box and say, yes, I agree with that. No homework ever. So that process of sending that back to the people is what's called a referendum. And so you're referring it back to the people. And so these two things, with initiative, with it starting with a petition, and then referendum, letting the people actually vote on it, is a big switch, a big change. And then the last thing that comes about as with respect to change on the state level is recall. And so recall says that if we have elected somebody who we find out is actually pretty bad at their job, they're pretty corrupt, and we don't like them, and we don't want them to serve out the rest of their term, we can actually recall them. We can say, you're no good, the people don't want you anymore, you have to go. And the way that they do that is they call a special election. That is important. Fighting Bob, have pizza to the people is what's called people don't want you anymore, you have to go. And the way that they do that is they call a special election. And in that special election, say somebody's term wasn't supposed to be up. They were supposed to serve for 4 years, and say it's only 2 years into their term. And after those 2 years, we realize they stink and we want to get rid of them. Well, we call a special election. And if that person does not get reelected, if the people say no, then they're out. Then we fire them, essentially. So we can now say, you're a crappy politician, you're not doing your job, you're out of here. So not only can I now, through initiative, I can start something, I can get a petition and start something. Through referendum, I can get people to vote on something. And then through recall, I can say, you're a corrupt politician and you're cruddy at your job, you get on out of here. So those three things are really key in trying to move politics forward in the right direction. I'll stop there and pick up with another.